Trucker, kicking off our conversation today on the Fallon Forum. We're going to be covering, as we often do, a bunch of ground today. We're going to talk about the ongoing scandal relevant to the Iowa juvenile home in Toledo. That situation just keeps getting worse. Apparently, it was something that Director Charles Palmer knew about, quite a while ago. And it's been going on since 1996, back when we had, a long time ago, Governor Branstad and a director of the Department of Human Services, Chuck Palmer. So we'll talk more about that. We're going to talk about food today. The tainted salad scandal. We apparently know where that came from, even though state government didn't want to tell us for a while. We're also going to talk about a couple related food issues. The ongoing efforts to try to gain some accountability from AJ and Peter DeCoster for the salmonella poisoning that sickened 2,000 Americans from bad eggs a few years back. Disappointing to see how little progress has been made at creating a better system for that. And we'll talk about where real eggs come from. Okay, we're also going to talk a little bit about a hamburger. Apparently you can get your burger now from a laboratory if you want. Of course, PETA likes that idea. I'm not sure I do. We'll talk about that today as well. And we're going to look a little bit more at our favorite Congressman, Steve King, and some of the new, not just stuff he's saying, but now doing. That's also of great concern. And speaking of great concern, the Republican Party has got to be just wondering where the heck they go from here. More evidence as to why that party is probably again, the only thing keeping the Republican Party, viable is a Democratic Party that just can't seem to get its act together entirely either. So we'll talk about all that today in the Fallon Forum. But first, I'm delighted to have Osha Gray Davidson join us on the phone from Phoenix, Arizona. Hello, Osha. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Ed. Thanks for inviting me.
And much of my audience might remember you from your years in Iowa City at the university.
That's right. Yeah, I lived there for quite a while, many, many years, and then loved it. I live in Arizona now.
I don't know whether you saw the news today, but congratulations are due to the University of Iowa, having been named the #1 party university in the country. I
did hear that. I'm dubious.
You're dubious?
Yes.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm not sure anyone is really recognizing it as great news, but anyway. And I don't know how they make those determinations, but at any rate, there you have it. #1 party school. Anyway, you've been in Phoenix for a while now. Yeah,
let's see. It's been 11 years since I moved here.
Yeah. And I think you're most well known in Iowa for a book you wrote that gained a lot of interest. And now I'm suddenly blanking on the name.
Broken Heartland.
Broken Heartland. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, that's a book I read many years ago and still have a copy of it. So,
thanks. Yeah. That was when I was living in Iowa, and actually at the time I was writing about all sorts of other things, but this was the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s,
right.
And what was called the farm crisis was going on. And the more research I did about it, the more I found out, no, it's not a farm crisis, it's a rural crisis, and it's not even a crisis, it's chronic. It had been going on for a long time.
Yeah, those are very good points. And unfortunately, a lot of that analysis is still relevant here.
Yeah, it's still going on.
And more recently, you've turned your analysis to the horrific fires in your part of the world. 10 states now, I think you wrote in your column that 10 states have seen the worst fire in history in the last year or two. And certainly the one that has kind of captivated the American psyche coast to coast is the fire in Yarnell, which was just astounding in terms of its physics, but also in terms of its impact on human life. And you talk about the connection to climate change and the connection to Tea Party politics.
Right.
Neither of those are without controversy. What kind of maybe before we talk about what kind of response you've had, maybe you can lay out a little bit of the case you're trying to make in that analysis.
Well, let's see. It started. I started looking at the Yarnell Hill fire. That was on June 31st was when 19 members, all but one of the 20 members of the Prescott, Arizona Granite Mountain hotshot crew, died after being entrapped by a wildfire that started by lightning a few days earlier. And I had just returned by coincidence from Montana, where I had spent almost a week as a fellow with the Institutes for Journalism and Natural Resources, looking at issues in the West, and one of the main issues was wildfires. And so I had a chance to talk with people like Ron Wakamoto at the University of Montana about the growing problems of wildfires in America. We've got more big fires now. We've got twice as many acres burned today in a typical wildfire as 40 years ago. And there are a whole bunch of stats that I lay out in the article showing, just how awful the situation is. One that I thought was particularly important in looking towards the future is that nearly 400 million acres, more than double the size of Texas, are at risk of burning now. And in the West, the fire season has grown in just 2 decades. It's grown 2.5 months longer than before.
Now, what are the outside dates of the fire season now?
It varies from place to place.
Sure.
Throughout the West. Where I live in the Southwest, it starts fairly early, but the problem is it starts much earlier now, and it lasts a lot longer. And there are some fire experts who are talking about a year-round fire season because some fires have smoldered throughout the winter. Part of the problem is with climate change, temperature is rapidly rising. I say rapidly. Some people would look at it as slow, but when you look at in historic terms, we've got 0.75 degree Fahrenheit increase every decade since 1970 in Arizona, which makes my state the fastest warming state in the nation at the same time as we're experiencing these horrendous wildfires.
Right. Now, I remember reading a column not too long back by Froma Harop, who's on this program occasionally with me. She's a syndicated journalist from Providence, Rhode Island. Perhaps you know of her. She argued that the biggest issue was not climate change, but development in areas where wildfires are prone to happen, and that it was poor land use decisions that were largely responsible for the increase in fires.
There's no one reason, and that's part of the problem when we look at things like this, just focusing on one thing. Several things happen at the same time. And it's true, there are 70,000 communities now at risk of burning. 1 in 3 housing units in the West are in what's called the wildland urban interface. So people are moving into areas that are prone to fire. We've had a century of policy of fire suppression where all fires are put out as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. And so now we've got this huge fuel load of dead trees and brush.
And normally that would have been cleared out by
smaller fires.
Same thing we do with the prairie here, but with less negative consequences if we don't do it right.
Only because there's so little prairie left, fortunately.
No, that's probably true. Yeah. What would a raging wildfire across the prairie look like if we had expansive tracts of prairie grass? I don't know.
I don't know. I know that it would move very fast. Fires in forests move relatively slowly. Fires in grass move very quickly, and that was part of the problem in Yarnell Hill. Why there was a tragedy there was due in part to the fact that this area was chaparral, which is a mixture of small trees, small mid-sized trees, and grass that's moved in. So it moved fast and it burned extremely hot because we have plants like manzanita here, which are one former hotshot called it gasoline on a stick or something like that. It burns extremely hot, long flame lengths.
Folks, we're talking with Osha Gray Davidson, who many of you might remember from his book Broken Heartland. Also, he was a professor at the University of Iowa for quite a while. And he's now in Phoenix and writes for Rolling Stone magazine and a bunch of other publications, and most recently an interesting piece about the Yarnell fire. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can call at 515-244-0077, or toll free, the number is 855-244-0077. If you are listening on KHOI 89.1 FM, out of north central Iowa, or if you're up in northeast Iowa listening on KPVL 89.1 FM. This is a rebroadcast, so don't attempt to give us a call. But if you want to listen to the program live Monday through Friday, every day from noon to 1 Central Time on the Fallon Forum website, fallonforum.com. Again, you're welcome to call and join the conversation here with myself and Osha Gray Davidson. Osha, you mentioned climate change as part of the problem. You also mentioned Tea Party politics. Tell us more about what your thinking is on that line. Yeah,
the connection there has less to do with climate change, although denial of climate change is a Tea Party based philosophy.
It's an article of faith, yes.
Yeah. Faith as opposed to science.
Exactly.
The fact that people are moving into the wildland-urban interface in huge numbers, that's the link mostly with Tea Party politics, because we actually know what we can do to prevent fires burning these communities. If you design them in the right way, fire harden them, make sure that you regulate them so that people don't have roofs that are made of wood and will burn quickly, or you make sure that they clear their land right close by their structures from having bushes or trees, then fire can move through a community. It's called a fire-adapted community. Where the Tea Party comes in is they say, well, no, I moved out here because I don't want the government telling me what to do. It's my land. I can do what I want. That's their philosophy right up until fires start, and then they call 911 and they expect firefighters to come in and save the structures that they refuse to protect.
Well, and then it's not just a call to 911. It's a conversation with FEMA. It's thanking the firefighters who are paid for by tax dollars to come out and help fight the flames. And yeah,
exactly. It's the ultimate in hypocrisy to say you don't want regulations, but you want the protections that come from the federal government. And that's what we experience in areas in Arizona and throughout the West, where people won't do what is responsible. They won't take personal responsibility, something they like to tout for others. But then they want the federal government to come in and bail them out.
So how do you respond to that? Have you ever had a situation where you've confronted that way of thinking directly? And I'm just curious, what kind of response do you get? It's hard to not see the logic in what you're saying.
I agree.
Silly me.
I have a hard time not seeing the logic in what I'm saying as well. Well, it sounds intuitively obvious when you put it like that, but people very often don't think about fire, in part because we've had a policy for 100 years of suppressing fire on wildlands. So there's at least a couple of generations where people should have seen fire in their community, but they haven't. So they don't think about the hypocrisy that's there, because it's really potential hypocrisy right up until the time it happens. They're not accustomed to having fire come through, and they should be. And when it does, it's devastating, as opposed to, well, it's just part of the ecosystem of having fire come through, and it's something that can be survived and we can build for.
And what about the overall Tea Party philosophy that, hey, I want to get away from government meddling with my life. I want to be able to do what I want, freedom to live how I want to live. But, hey, I'm going to call 911 when I've got trouble, and I'll expect FEMA to help me out when this place burns down. How do you, that general philosophy, and that certainly applies in a lot of areas in life. I don't want the government meddling with the healthcare system, but I'll sure use that Medicaid program when I'm eligible.
Well, I don't know what you can do about that in terms of trying to convince the people that hold those views. You can point out the inconsistencies of it, but I think what we need to do is move forward as a nation and put in place policies that protect the majority and protect the minority. And they're not going to like it, but they have to expect. Then one hotshot I talked to said that, I'm not going to go save their house. It's going to burn. I'm just not going to do it. Well, of course they shouldn't do it, because it puts their lives at risk. The problem is it puts other people's land at risk and their lives. One woman I talked to in Yarnell did try to keep her yard free of fuel for fires. She did a pretty good job. In fact, her house didn't burn but she didn't know about it. Didn't know that it didn't burn for quite some time, and she was at a shelter. There's a mandatory evacuation order, but she pointed out it was just lucky that one of her neighbors kept their house reasonably free of fire hazards as well, because if they hadn't, her house could burn too. And she had no answer for that other than we do have to have regulations that protect a community. And that's, we have a choice. Either we do that or people's places will burn. And it really is impossible to tell firefighters, no, just don't go in there. I mean, these firefighters, that is the policy. The idea was you don't go in if it is not safe. But there's this desire as firefighters. It's their job to protect lives and land and property. And this fire team in particular, the crew at Yarnell, was based right nearby. And it's hard to tell, or it's hard for people to not want to go in and protect their neighbors, friends, relatives, houses. They thought this was a perfect storm of all sorts of conditions. We have a historic drought that's partly tied to climate change here.
Right.
A storm moved in. There was a downdraft. A column of air from the fire, superheated air rising up from the fire, was squashed down by cold air when a storm moved in, and that blasted. It was like a blowtorch blowing the fire sideways and trapped the firefighters.
It seems like the number of so-called perfect storms is becoming more and more frequent, whether they be the conditions that lead to the horrific fires we've seen in Yarnell and elsewhere, or whether they lead to some of the largest ever hurricanes, or whether they lead to repeated tornadic activity in little towns in Oklahoma. I mean, these kinds of climatic conditions, these weather phenomena, these weather events are becoming more and more common. And it's impossible to deny that unless you also want to deny the validity of science. And
it's true that a lot of these things are happening more frequently. And when you allow people to move into these fire-prone and hurricane-prone areas, that sets it up so that there's going to be more of these events where people die, and it's a tragedy. And I guess the most tragic part is it's an avoidable tragedy in the case of wildfires. There are things that we can do to protect firefighters and communities.
Osha, well, thank you so very much for joining us from Phoenix, Arizona today.
Ed, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to talk with an Iowan again.
All right, well, we're here. We'll be here. And actually, I'll be out your way next year. The Great March for Climate Action, of course, is coming through Arizona. Not too far south of where the Yarnell fire was, in fact. I don't know. We'll be there in April. I mean, is that prior to fire season, or should we be paying attention to that possibility as well?
That is prior to official fire season, but who knows by next year what will be fire season.
All right. Again, thank you so much for joining us, folks. Osha Gray Davidson, a journalist, freelance writer, and author of Broken Heartland, a book that many of us here in Iowa appreciate and remember quite well. Thanks again, Osha.
Thank you, Ed.
All right. We're going to switch gears here, and we're talking, gear shifting. It's what we do in talk radio. Steve King at it again, this time not so much with his lips, but this time quietly behind the scenes. Who knew that Steve King could do something quietly? But apparently he has, and this is the Farm Bill, which who knows what that will look like. Again, it's been the food stamp program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program has been taken out of the Farm Bill, and it passed without that in there. Who knows what the fate of food stamps is going to be? But we do know that the Farm Bill itself is, we're uncertain where that's going to go. But Steve King is not letting that stop him from trying to do some things that he likes, that certain of his big ag buddies probably like, but I think most of us would find objectionable. And again, I want to thank Reka Basu for helping to point this out in the recent column she wrote. Okay, so there are laws in place, of course, that protect us from environmental toxins. When we see a problem, we tend to try to find some way of making sure that it doesn't get worse through regulation. Again, maybe some people are, but I am not for over-regulation, but certainly there are places where regulations are needed. Okay, so Steve King has offered an amendment to the Farm Bill. It's Amendment 71, and I've not been able to track down the most recent development. This is just a few days ago. But Amendment 71 would prevent any state from keeping out agricultural products produced in other states without the same standards. Okay, so basically, Steve King, who is always talking about states' rights and about keeping government out of our business, wants big government, in this case the federal government, to say to Iowa or any other state that you can't say no to certain agricultural products that are produced using standards that you would not find acceptable, that your legislature, your governor, your state has found unacceptable. So now the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, again, this is no extreme organization, and I will later reference PETA, which I do feel to be an extreme organization, and I will reference them adversely. I've never had any complaints with the ASPCA. And their spokesperson, their vice president, in fact, Richard Patch, had this to say. He said to have one U.S. congressman from one congressional district offer an amendment that would abolish all states' animal protection laws is unbelievable. And I would add that it's particularly unbelievable coming from a guy who constantly professes to be the one who is fighting for local control, for states to have the right to do what they want to do, to keep big government out of their business. So, so just to be a little bit more clear about what this amendment would do, Amendment 71 to the Farm Bill would cover products raised on farms or produced or raised on farms, or also that are processed or manufactured, farm produce that is turned into something else like jam, honey, whatever. That would also include fruits and vegetables, dairy products, poultry, beef, pork, honey again. It would include seafood, which isn't relevant to Iowa, but also wine, I presume beer. I presume anything like that would be impacted by this. Now, what is the impact? Well, according to the ASPCA, the impact would be a race to the bottom because no state could maintain a standard higher than the lowest standard in a producing state. So, California, Reka references California as an example here. They, and maybe folks remember this, they passed a ballot initiative a few years back requiring that only eggs produced by cage-free hens could be sold in that state as of the year 2015. So again, that's got another couple years to go into effect. But under that amendment, under King's amendment, that is to say, California would have no say in how eggs coming into the state from elsewhere were produced. So what is the point again, this is the popular will. Folks decide they want their eggs produced by something other than a caged hen. They go to the polls. In some states we do this through the legislative process. In some states like California, it's ballot and initiative. So you go to the polls, you make your case. In some cases, these things can pass with a pretty big margin. And so, it's a democratic process. You decide that you want only eggs produced in your state that are cage-free. And along comes some yahoo from Western Iowa who says, no, you're going to have to accept eggs that are produced by A.J. DeCoster, for example, who we're going to talk a little bit about later in the program. Yep, A.J. DeCoster back in the news. And again, as you can imagine, not particularly favorably. So anyway, the mind-boggling thing here is that you can talk, Steve King can out of one side of his mouth talk about, less government, while out of the other side pushing for a big government intervention in what people have decided. And this isn't just about California and about free-range eggs or cage-free, I should say. Big difference between cage-free and free-range. It's about any state initiative relevant to how the people in that state want to see their food produced. So now, again, basically that's out the window. I mean, what else? You could consider what would happen with salmon. If the Pacific Northwest states determine that they want their salmon to be raised, caught in the wild, not raised in farms where the genetically modified salmon are, creating concern among the consuming public, but also escaping into the wild and causing havoc on the wild population. If they want that, no. But if this passes, they can't do that. So, okay. So, wow. Anyway, I don't quite know how this has panned out, except that I really hope that most states will most congressmen rather will vote strongly against this. Here's an example too. One more example. You have what we call grade A pasteurized milk and milk products can be sold in restaurants and grocery stores. So this would again preempt that. The probability that this is going to pass, I don't know. I'm having a hard time seeing it pass. But again, with that Congress, which is already 40 times now voted to repeal Obamacare, and done some other pretty. I mean, again, I'm not a huge fan of the Affordable Care Act. I got lots of trouble with it. But face it, just an outright, flat across the board repeal is senseless. And some of these things, like what King wants, this standardized, the federal government preempts all approach is not sensible either. There's and again, if you really believe that local people have some say in the matter, should have a say in the matter, then this is absolutely the wrong way to go. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about a related issue. Speaking of cage-free eggs, we're going to talk about AJ DeCoster and how the Coster family farms are still getting away with it despite efforts to try to hold them accountable after the salmonella poisoning that sickened 2,000 people not too many years ago. We're also going to talk about the Iowa juvenile home in Toledo and Governor Branstad trying to pass the buck off onto, of all people, the Public Employees Union. Interesting. And also new evidence that DHS department head Chuck Palmer knew about this a while back and possibly knew about it back in 1996 when he was with Branstad during his first time in charge of that department. We'll talk about that when we come back. Also the tainted salad issue. That's it's gone away, but it hasn't. But fresh out of the laboratory and under your plate, news about lab-grown hamburger. And some say it lacks flavor. PETA says it's a great idea. We'll talk about that as well when we come back from a short break. I do want to thank Gateway Market & Cafe for sponsoring this segment of our show. Gateway is at 20th and Woodland. And I get there often, folks. It's a great place. We're actually going to be starting some regular walks on Sunday morning that will meet at Gateway. Not just for a great walk, but afterwards, if inclined, a great brunch. They do have a wonderful breakfast, lunch, and supper and brunch as well. And, of course, a great grocery store. So do check them out and thank them for supporting the alternative to commercial radio. I want to thank some of my restaurant supporters, Tally's Restaurant Bar and Catering in Beaverdale, where you have great seating on the roof and also at the sidewalk level. I also want to thank Hawk Restaurant in the East Village, where 90% of the food that you consume there comes from local farms and local producers. And I want to thank Dan Kelly's real estate business in Newton. Dan's been a big supporter of this program. And in his spare time, when he's not working as a legislator, he makes a living buying and selling property. So if you've got something to look at in Newton, give Dan Kelly a shout. I'll be back in just a few minutes.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershot.
I'm administrative manager
I am the senior technician.
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're going to do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed rider it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you going to say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're going to be listening. They're going to want to know what your challenges are. Then they're going to come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm going to take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed rider, it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day 1 of webcast1live.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates. In just a minute, there's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast One Live. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. But actually, it's the beginning of Webcast One Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going.
The dawn of a new era begins. From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
That's Max Wellman, and we're back to our conversation here on the Fallon Forum. You know, I usually am smart enough not to wear green on the set here, but for those who are viewing the show, as opposed to those who are listening to either one of the two radio stations in Ames or Northeast Iowa that carry this, you will notice I've got a brand new Climate March t-shirt on. Yes, that's right. It shows the route of the march next year, leaving California March 1st, leaving Los Angeles and walking 3,000 miles almost through Arizona, New Mexico, up to Colorado, across the Midwest, and down across the Rust Belt to Washington, D.C. And it's in green, so my producer, Maddie, has been able to find a way to make it look less weird, because green usually comes off looking really, really weird on this set. So nice job there, technical wizard. Hey, we're talking about food here for a bit before we launch into talking about the Iowa juvenile home in Toledo. A few food issues to talk about, but we were talking about Steve King's amendment to the Farm Bill that would preempt any local control when it comes to regulations on food. For example, California's prohibition of eggs that are not raised cage-free. You've got starting 2015, the only eggs produced in California for sale there will have to be from hens that are cage-free. King wants to preempt that. Just one final comment on King, and this one not from me, this one from Dennis Faber in Emmitsburg. A letter to the editor recently that I got an absolute kick out of. This is in reference to King's comments about how for every one illegal immigrant who might be a valedictorian, there are 100 who are smuggling drugs, who have calves the size of cantaloupes because they're stuffed their pant legs with marijuana. Anyway, Dennis writes, for every congressman who is a valedictorian, he goes on to say, it is time to put the Steve King immigration remarks brouhaha behind us and just realize that for every congressman that is a valedictorian, there's another 100 up there who weigh 180 pounds, and they've got brains the size of a pea because they are hauling 75-pound bags of cash from special interest lobbies across to their campaign headquarters. Ouch on so many levels. I mean, okay, so that's not exactly a kind commentary on Congress, but, you know, I guess when Congress is polling at 17% favorability, I guess the public can be tolerated to offer some commentary that's less than what I want to say, flattering. Okay, so on to other food issues. We talked about the situation in California with the law that is now in place where eggs will have to be produced cage-free. You probably remember the salmonella poisoning that resulted in 2,000 people being struck ill. That was back in 2010. Compliments of AJ and Peter DeCoster's farms. Again, I use the farm, the very, very broadest sense of the word, meaning a place where agricultural products are produced, in this case, in a very industrial fashion. 2,000 people got sick from salmonella, largest outbreak in the history of our country. And so, you know, there were new egg safety procedures that were approved actually shortly before the recall, interestingly, which again, if you remember, part of that scandal was that that folks saw that recall coming. They saw the poisoning coming, and they saw it coming, so they prepared these new regulations, and yet they still didn't warn the public. I remember Iowa State University kind of coming up with a blank stare when confronted about that, and I was one of many that confronted them on that. Okay, so this new recall plan, again, back in 2010, and again, it involved production plants such as DeCoster's facilities. Part of that was increased inspections, but these production these farms, if we can call them that again, these industrial facilities are still not being inspected as required by the new procedures put in place. And in fact, according to this recent information, it could still be many more years before these facilities are inspected. So, okay. Now the FDA is saying that they, they're saying that even the fact that we're already behind, it could take another 3 to 5 years more to complete inspections of all registered egg producers. Okay, so this Modernization Act, again, which was actually put in place before the egg recall, it's meant to improve the prevention of food safety problems, but the FDA, their own inspectors have found that there are deficiencies, not just small ones, but big ones. At about 40% of all the facilities that were inspected, there are significant deficiencies. And we're looking at 500 facilities that were inspected in 2011. Okay, so I mean, that's 40%. 500 facilities inspected. I mean, way less than they're supposed to. I mean, they're running 3 to 5 years behind. And even among those, 40% are not meeting the new standards. And trust me, I would bet money that these new standards are still a lot weaker than many of us would feel warranted. Okay. So, again, looking at this, how long did it take the FDA to come up with those new standards? Well, if you guessed it was quick, you guessed wrong. If you guessed 10 years, you're about right. It took about 10 years just to come up with those standards, with that approach to assuring egg safety. So what came into being in 2010 was they first started working on that in the year 2000. Okay? Something's wrong with that. Something is badly wrong with that. So the FDA, of course, now requires an inspection of all egg production facilities. And I wonder, this is not clear to me, but I wonder, when they say all egg production facilities, I assume they mean any farm that is selling eggs. I don't know that. I'd like to find out about that. If you know the answer to that question, give me a call. 244-0077, 244-0077. Are small farmers who may have a 50 flock laying, maybe they have 50 birds laying eggs. Are they also required to be inspected? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that the FDA divides producers into 3 different categories. There are those like the Coster, the giants, with over 50,000 or more layers. And in some cases, we're talking about facilities with 1 million or more birds. So 50,000 plus is big. The middle-size operations are classified in the 3,000 to 50,000 range. And the small, and I'm putting small in quotes here for you, the small laying facilities, the small egg buildings, are 3,000 or less, which to me, that's comical that 3,000 means small. I have 12 hens. I feel like that's a big flock. So, I guess I wonder where this stops. I wonder where the FDA decides, okay, you're just a little guy. We're not going to bother to, we're going to focus on inspecting the people who have been offenders, the AJ DeCosters of the world. Okay, so, and again, think about where the egg production, where your egg comes from. The farms that are classified as 3,000 or more, they make up 80% of all egg production in America. Now, I know that's starting to change. I mean, there's again, that still leaves 20% of y'all who are getting your eggs from the farmers markets, from a community-supported agricultural operation, from somewhere where the hens are leading a much better life, and probably, you've got a quality of egg that is superior as well. So anyway, it's disturbing to me that it took the FDA 10 years to come up with an approach to assuring egg safety, and that it has been 3 years since the worst incidents in our history of a salmonella poisoning, and so little has been done. And among what has been done, 40% of those inspected, those facilities inspected, are coming up short on standards that I suspect are already pretty lame. Now, that's just, there's all kinds of wrong in that. There is a way around this. Get your eggs from somebody you know. You know, check out the local farm in your area. Local farm. I presume there's lots of local farms. More and more. I mean, the growth in the number of farmers markets in this country, it's outstanding. And the growth of people using farmers markets here in Iowa, it's very encouraging. I mean, the one in Des Moines, 20,000 people on any given Saturday. You know, it's a trend that is continuing, that is very favorable. Right now, I'd say the demand is actually a bit ahead of the supply. So I hope more and more people go into local production. And certainly when it comes to eggs, if 80% of the eggs we consume in this state, in this country, are coming from DeCoster type facilities, and as we do our part to help educate people about the reality of these inspections, if we can even call them that, then I think more and more people will begin to want to get their eggs from sources they can trust. And the truth is, if you're buying your eggs from a farmer that you know, and you have a chance to see how those chickens are raised, and you know what they're eating, chances are you're probably not going to be concerned about what impact that might have on your health, because it won't be a problem. Okay, on to two other food issues here real quick. The Mexican vegetable processing plant that was responsible for the bags of salad that caused lots of cyclospora infections, mostly on Iowa and Nebraska. We have identified that. And, it was interesting to me that the original response by a state official here in Iowa was that, well, the public doesn't need to know. It wouldn't do them any good. It wouldn't do you any good to know because there's no more illness out there. Everybody who's sick, everybody who's going to get sick has already gotten sick. Nobody else is going to join the ranks of the sick. You know, we figured it out. Nothing to see here. No worries at all. Go back to leading your lives. We'll take care of the problem. You don't need to know. That incredible response rightfully gained a lot of negative reaction. Now, I'm trying to remember the name of the fellow who made that ridiculous statement. But it's again, to the federal government's credit in this case, they agreed that was not adequate, and they looked into it further, and they released information about where the contamination came from. And apparently it came from someplace called Taylor Farms de Mexico. I love the combining of English and Spanish there. Let's call it Spanglish. Taylor, not exactly a Latino name. Taylor Farms de Mexico. Anyway, they're responsible. They're associated with Taylor Farms of Salinas, California, and they ship that stuff nationally. And again, I don't know why you'd want to buy salad from Mexico when we grow that stuff darn well right here in Iowa. And the truth is about salad, you could pretty much have salad greens, 8 or 9 months of the year. And again, if you're a farmer, a local farmer, and you're set up for this, you can do a really good job of this. But even if you're just a home gardener like me, I mean, I can have salad from the beginning of March. Actually, I've had salad from as late February through the first part of November. Actually, even further into November. You do this with successive plantings. You do it by using cold frames. You do it by insulating those cold frames in such a way that plants have a chance to sprout, to germinate, and then to receive some protection. You can do this. Actually, one of the worst months for salad right now, this time of the year. We're kind of in between spring and fall salad mixes. But you can do this, and maybe for the other months of the year, you do something other than salad. I don't know. That's why I admire Hawk Restaurant. They find a way around the fact that they may not have the same. You might not have all the same ingredients every month of the year. So again, don't buy it from those folks. And the other takeaway from this is me. I mean, again, there's several lessons here. One is that government will often try to suppress information the public has a right to access. That's something we should all be aware of and paying attention to. And we'll talk about that. We may run out of time today. I want to talk about that relevant to Governor Branstad and the Iowa Juvenile Home in Toledo. But government will often try to suppress information. They'll try to keep us from knowing what we have a right to know. But the other lesson here is if you scream and shout loud enough and stomp your feet aggressively enough, they may back down because they have no choice. And that's what happened here. So we know that it was a, quote, farm in Mexico owned by a, quote, farm in Salinas, California, that sold that product. Again, this was lettuce, bagged lettuce, sold at Olive Garden and Red Lobster. So the other lesson here, folks, is when you go out to eat, enjoy a good local restaurant, not a big chain that just ships its food in from Mexico. Again, a lot of the local restaurants that I frequent, and certainly Gateway Market does this as well, they get stuff in season from local sources. And the other lesson here is maybe you shouldn't have salad all year round. Maybe there's sometimes when you want to skip that in lieu of something else, something more seasonal. All right, so I could talk for a while about this lab-grown hamburger. PETA likes it. This is basically a GMO hamburger coming at you from the laboratory near you. PETA says as long as there's anybody who's willing to kill a chicken, a cow, or a pig to make their meal, we are all for this. Instead of the millions and billions of animals being slaughtered now, we could just clone a few cells to make burgers or chops. Oh gosh, what is that? That's crazy talk. Again, here's where PETA, it looks like they're siding with some big corporate interest that thinks it can make a better burger in a test tube. I'm not buying that. I'm not either buying the argument or the product. If I'm gonna eat meat, I'm gonna get it from a local source and somebody again that I can trust. Okay, so we don't have enough time to talk about the isolation units at Toledo. We're going to talk for a little bit about it though. I'm again very disturbing. I am almost surprised that I served on the Human Services Committee for 4 years in the legislature. And this may not have been going on while I was on that committee. It looks like it started in 96. I had moved on to another committee at that point. But I did visit a bunch of the human service facilities and criminal justice institutions in this state. I was appalled at what I saw at Mitchellville, where the use of isolation cells was very common and common for even ridiculously minor offenses. I mean, things that weren't nothing violent at all. Somebody just in some cases just failed to follow a simple rule relevant. I remember one case relevant to what they were supposed to do with their laundry, and they end up in isolation. I mean, it's just it is appalling to me that this is even an accepted form of punishment. It is equally appalling to look at the response of Governor Branstad. Again, as with Speedgate, where he did not know that his trooper was doing 90 miles an hour. He did not know that this was happening at the Iowa Juvenile Home. Okay, you may not have known. I can give you that. You may not have known. State government's a big place. You might not know all the details. I'm sure, however, that DHS Director Chuck Palmer knew, and apparently he did know in 2012. So, within the last year or so, he's known about these isolation units. Personally, I would be shocked to understand. I would be shocked to discover that he did not know back in the 90s that these are being used. Yeah, so for Governor Branstad to try to pass the buck, say, no, it wasn't Chuck Palmer's fault. No, I have no responsibility here. What does he do? He blames the Public Employees Union. And the Public Employees Union, they're not beyond reproach at times, but come on, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous to blame the Public Employees Union because the management, who are part of the union, are making this decision to stick people in isolation. The one place you might be able to make some criticism of ASME members is those who work at the juvenile home in Toledo should have spoken up. If you see this going on, you should speak up. Again, you get into that situation and maybe you stop, you get desensitized to it. Maybe you fear for your job. Maybe you fear for other types of retribution. I mean, go talk with Larry Headland, the 25-year veteran of the Department of Criminal Investigation, who lost his job because he spoke up, because he was critical of the state patrol letting the governor get away with going 90 miles an hour. So you have to wonder, again, if Governor Branstad wants to be consistent here, he won't blame AFSCME, just as he didn't blame the state patrol for what happened with his Speedgate issue. He would probably blame the head of the Department of Human Services. I mean, if he's not man enough to have the buck stop with him, then at least he should be willing to have the buck stop with the guy he appointed to head the Department of Human Services. But no, he says Chuck Palmer is also, like him, beyond reproach. We'll see where this goes. Again, I want to, Clark Kaufman, a journalist doing journalism the way it was intended to be done. Good stuff. I don't know how much time and effort went into this particular piece of research, but it had to be involved. It had to be extensive. And I look at what happened out at the facility in Adalisa in eastern Iowa, and all the positive developments that came out of good journalism on that issue. And I can't help but think that there may be some positive things coming out of the good journalism being done, exposing this atrocity at the Iowa Juvenile Home. Again, I'd love to get some of the people on this program who actually spent time in that facility, who can tell us from their personal experience what it was like. Anyway, it's just so wrong on so many levels, but we have to keep talking about it, because if we don't, if we are silent, then that our silence will be regarded as agreement, as comfort with the atrocity that, okay, we've somehow accepted that this is okay. And I know that we haven't. Most of us, I think nearly everybody I know thinks it's appalling, and we agree that it should change. So hopefully that's one change that will come out of this, is an end to the use of these isolation units. Hopefully another thing that will come out of this is pressure on Governor Branstad to accept some responsibility, and to make sure the acceptance of responsibility is shared by others in his administration. Again, in particular, Chuck Palmer. Now, I worked with Palmer a lot when I was in the State House. And even though I've been out of the legislature for quite some time now, I still get calls from people who have human service issues to deal with. And I've already had 2 this year. And I actually called Palmer. To his credit, even though I no longer have any standing in state government, he was willing to meet with me. I got to tell you, though, I felt like I was talking to somebody who wasn't hearing anything I was saying. So I appreciated the time, but honestly, I don't feel it accomplished anything. And I don't really know if I was able to do much at all to help. Certainly one person I was trying to help, no luck at all. The other, possibly some relief, but minimal. So, we'll be talking more about that, because this problem, like so many problems that Branstad is now embroiled in, is not going away anytime soon. All right, hey, I want to thank all you folks up in Northeast Iowa at KPVL 89.1 for supporting a local station that does a great job in your community. And thank you for listening to this program. If you want to hear it live, Monday through Friday, 12 to 1 on FallonForum.com. Same goes for the folks in Central Iowa, north of Des Moines, KHOI 89.1 FM. Thank you for listening. And you can also hear the show online at FallonForum.com. I want to thank the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit for sponsoring the Fallon Forum, for sponsoring this segment of our show. That's coming up on November 9th. I've got marching on my brain. November 9th at Drake University, a great way to learn how to start and grow your business. I also want to thank the Ritual Cafe at 13th and Locust for helping to sponsor this program, and the Fighting Burrito, also at that location, 13th and Locust, where you can get a custom-made burrito for a very affordable price. Fighting Burrito, of course, also in Ames on Welch Ave. I want to thank Diana's Wedding Cakes out of Newton. And I want to thank Story County Veterinary Clinic, Kim Holdings business, that has been a longtime supporter of this program and done a lot of work in our community for people's animals, keeping them healthy, keeping them strong, keeping them good looking. Speaking of good looking, I want to thank Maddie Kane, my producer. I want to thank Webcast One Live for providing the studio. I want to thank my cup of water for providing the sustenance I need to keep me from stumbling any more often than I do. And I want to thank the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club, Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility, and the Great March for Climate Action.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.